What comes up for you when you think about spending time alone? And when you're on your own, when the noise of life settles down and it's just you, who are you? And what do you experience with yourself? When was the last time you truly prioritized your relationship with yourself above and beyond your other relationships and your responsibilities? I spent the last 4 years being single. The first of those 2 years were intentionally single, meaning I was purposefully unattached and not pursuing dating. And these past 2 years have been part of the cosmic plan that I've learned to surrender to and trust and embrace fully, which has resulted in an absolutely transcendent, deeply healing, deeply enriching, and wholly incredible 4 years of my life. And that's what this episode is going to be about. I'm doing it now because next year I will no longer be single. So I decided I might as well share all the lessons that I learned in these past 4 years while being single in my early 40s and why it turned out to be one of the most rewarding and healing and transformative times of my life. Welcome to The Simple Source, your source for all things self-love, self-healing, personal growth, and spirituality. I'm your host, Linda Valines. I used to be chronically sick and unhappy. I spent years trying anything and everything to heal, but I never got better. It wasn't until my late husband was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer that I finally stopped searching for the answers outside of myself and turned within. I taught myself how to truly love and heal myself, how to finally be authentically healthy and happy, mind, body, and soul. I have over 10 years of personal and professional self-healing and teaching experience. I'm a trauma-informed, certified holistic health and wellness coach, certified Ayurvedic counselor, and author. I healed myself of a lifetime of complex traumas and chronic conditions with joy and ease. Now I'm teaching you to do the same. So if you're ready to heal and love yourself more, mind, body, and soul, without all the struggle and stress, and with more joy and productivity, join me to liberate your highest, healthiest, and happiest self and learn how to thrive more simply. Let's get started with today's episode. So whether you're navigating being single, or if you're in a relationship, or if you're just grieving a recent breakup or ending of a relationship, or you're just simply on a journey to rediscover yourself, this episode is going to apply to anyone looking to nurture and prioritize a more empowering and loving and healing relationship with themselves. Because being alone is so necessary to know yourself, to love yourself, to heal yourself. I'm not advocating for being alone for your whole life. Maybe that is your intention. For some people, partnership isn't a purpose in this life. Romantic partnership, regardless, relationships, all types of relationships, romantic, platonic, familial, professional, as adults, they're extensions and reflections of our relationship with ourselves. And so that's why spending time alone with ourselves in an intentional and healing way is so fundamental to our well-being and our ability to have healthier relationships in our external world, because that ability to know yourself and love yourself and be comfortable with yourself, that determines how you show up in your other relationships. And most people don't prioritize a relationship with themselves. They prioritize relationships with other people. And a large part of that is because many people are scared to be alone. They're uncomfortable to be with themselves. They're uncomfortable eating alone. They're uncomfortable traveling alone. They're uncomfortable taking trips alone, going to the movies alone, going to a museum alone. And that's partly because codependency is so normalized in our culture and in society. And it just represents a foundational, universal lack of self-love and self-trust and and self-worth that is dependent on another person. And all of that just distracts you from being with yourself, from loving yourself, from knowing yourself, and ultimately healing yourself. And then if people are alone, it's, likely because they want to be distracted from being with someone else, like a family member or partner, right? It's a move to avoid being with someone else as opposed to an intention to be with yourself. And those are two very different experiences. The former is a coping mechanism, and the latter is an act of self-love, an act of self-care. This is all rooted fundamentally in the fact that most people just don't feel whole in themselves. They don't know how to be happy on their own or with themselves. They need someone else to validate that for them. They need someone else to validate their wholeness, their happiness, their enoughness, their lovability. So I wanted to do an episode sharing my journey of being by myself, being in a relationship with myself for the past 4 years, to hopefully inspire you and shed light on why prioritizing a relationship with ourselves and learning to fall in love with ourselves is the greatest gift that we can give ourselves. So my husband passed of late-stage kidney cancer about 8 years ago. And since he passed, I've had 2 serious relationships. And the last relationship ended 4 years ago. And it was an intense karmic relationship that was as traumatic as it was loving. And despite the depth and the sincerity and the magnitude of that love, it was a trauma bond. It was a karmic relationship. And so it was ultimately unstable because it was never meant to last. So needless to say, after that second relationship ended for the second time, because we broke up and then we got back together and then we broke up again, I was pretty done with relationships after my husband passed. 9 months after my husband passed, I unexpectedly met someone and we quickly fell in love. And it was very surprising. And then after that relationship ended, a few months later, I met karmic relationship home slice. And then that whole journey ensued. And then that whole journey ended. And so after that second relationship ran its second course, I really just needed a break from men and relationships. And I knew I needed real time with myself after my husband passed. And transitioning into life as a widow and rebuilding my life as a widow and falling in love twice. And both those relationships didn't work out. I was really emotionally tired and I needed to prioritize myself. I needed to reconnect with myself and to my purpose and reinvest in my healing and realign with my highest self. And so I set the intention after my last relationship ended 4 years ago that I was going to spend at least 2 years being intentionally unattached, meaning I wasn't going to pursue dating. I wasn't even going to think about dating for at least 2 years. And it was such a freaking relief. I had room to breathe, it felt like, for a long time. And I had this complete autonomy and freedom to do what I wanted and to live how I wanted. And so what I did was I intentionally reconnected with my soul, with my spirit and my spirituality. That was a big intention. And that resulted in massive spiritual up-leveling. And it was truly magical. I just dove really fucking deep into my spiritual health and world and well-being and life. And so after my husband passed, he came to me and I had a spiritual awakening, or I'll just call it a reawakening. And then I had an involuntary Kundalini awakening. And so that was my first spiritual sort of quote unquote awakening. And then my second spiritual reawakening, I like to call it, was 4 years ago after that last relationship ended. And I wholly dove right back into my spiritual life. And that's when I saw my highest self, my spirit. And I call him Blue because he's a giant blue being of light. Spirit's asexual. He presented in a very intentional masculine energy. And so I call him him. And even though there's no sex and souls have no sex. But anywho, so I call him Blue. And I, began talking to my high self, like my genuine, not in a amorphous sort of concept, but Blue. I saw him and we connected and, we connect every day still. But I learned, I taught myself how to channel and I met all, my highest spirit guides. And it was such a magical time. And it was a couple of years of really going super deep into my spiritual life. And I reawakened dormant psychic and spiritual abilities. And it was so fun. And even though I was alone, and this was also the pandemic, so we were even more isolated, I actually never felt alone during that time. It was a deeply fulfilling, deeply connected time for me because I was so connected to spirit. I was so connected to my highest self and to my guides and to the universe. And it was such a profoundly enriching and enlightening era. I also, in that time, intentionally reconnected with my passions and my purpose. And so I wrote my first book about unconditional self-love. And then I created my signature program, the Source membership. And that was really intense. And it was all in service of me relishing in that relationship with myself and stretching out into all the freedom that I had gifted myself by not thinking about relationships, by not being on dating apps I really didn't even think about it. It was such a relief to not give a fuck about whether or not, I was going to have a date or talk to someone, or it was just such a massive space that was created in my mind and in my body and my soul to really fall in love with myself is what happened. And I healed so much because I had so much time and space to invest in my healing. And so I went even deeper into my healing process and journey. And then I reinvested in my professional education and I read and I took courses. I consciously expanded exponentially in that time. And I learned so much and my expertise grew so much. And I developed an even deeper relationship with not only my mind, my higher conscious, but also, the inner parts of myself, my inner child, my shadow. And then I ended up manifesting quite a lot. And it was an incredible, those first 2.5 years were so profoundly magical and rewarding. And there was such liberation and there was so much support that I felt from the universe and from my highest self and from my guides and from my whole spirit family. It was truly a really special time and it flew by. It really flew by. And I truly learned then that when we embrace and embody our whole authentic self, and we prioritize deep inner healing and meet those parts of ourselves that we've tucked away and we've hidden due to shame, due to discomfort, due to trauma, etc. We really invite all aspects of ourselves into our daily life, into our healing journey, into our spiritual journey. The whole process of living not only becomes way more magical and enjoyable, but your healing and growth accelerate because you're being met moment by moment with full support from your highest self and your guides in the universe. Because when you show up 100% in your authenticity, meaning radical self-acceptance, radical self-love, complete openness to your divinity and a willingness to really truly be connected and guided by your highest self, life is joyful, life is magical, life is healing. And your purpose becomes so much more concrete and you're so much more attuned to what your purpose is. And you feel so much more empowered to live in your purpose. And I really understood that because I was living it those first 2 years. So then 2.5 years after I was like ready, I was like, okay, it's been a long time being single. This has been a minute. So I'm ready, quote unquote, ready to start dating again. And so I started reopening the apps and in a very chill, very relaxed manner, because by this time I had already established a habit of not looking and not caring. So I actually had to make notes, like set reminders for myself to like look on the apps and engage, because I had just gotten so out of the habit of thinking and caring about that. But this is what's interesting, friend. So my expectation of using the apps, because I had just this experience, in my mid 30s, which is the previous time that I was using the apps, it was like very easy for me to meet men. I mean, I met those 2 relationships that I spoke about previously. I met those men on the apps, and it happened really, really quickly. And this time, my experience when I reopened the apps, so, being in my early 40s, I guess there's a difference from being in your mid 30s. I don't know what it is, because I really don't look that different. And it became really clear that there was a distinct change in the energetics of me using the apps. And so I really had to come to terms with that, like having to do real healing work and shadow work around that, making peace with my age. That was a big one, and what it means for me to be a woman in my early 40s, because it kind of just like creeps up on you. I also just I think age really is just a number, because I'm certainly way healthier than a lot of people in their 20s. And like, what does it matter? I don't know. I mean, it just, at a certain point, you're like, I don't care about age. Anyways, I digress. But I had to make peace with the fact that, okay, yeah, I am in my early 40s, and as a woman, and that, I don't know, that just like comes with stuff that I had to really see and I had to acknowledge, because again, when we avoid these things that are being reflected to us in our reality, because my experience using dating apps in my early 30s was very different. 9 times out of 10, when I would swipe right, like it would be a match. And this time around, I'm like swiping right, and I'm like, hello, is this on? I was like, what the fuck is going on? I really do not look different. Basically, it was like the same profile. And so the only thing was like, I'm older. And so I had to like really do healing work around that. And what is being reflected to me in this experience, and digging deep with those shadow aspects, me judging men who only date younger women, and me judging, the collective male shadow. And so it was a really interesting healing journey these past 2 years of moving through my experience being single now as a woman in my early 40s, and appreciating that I guess it's different. Maybe I don't feel different in the sense like I don't feel older. In a lot of ways, I actually feel fucking younger, but that's because I don't think age is a limitation. And so there was a lot of like contrast that was happening in the past 2 years, highs and also lows, having my expectations challenged, coming to terms with how also a relationship would fit into my life now, because I'm so purpose driven. I'm really dedicated to my purpose because I have an enormous highest purpose, and I'm here to change the world, and I'm fully committed to that. And that means that I have to consciously balance my ambition, my purpose with the other aspects of my life. And so I had to live through like very distinct phases of loneliness in order to appreciate that, because I was like on the other extreme for a while, because I was relishing in the freedom and in my autonomy and in the magic that I was experiencing, and the up-leveling that I was stretching into. And then it was like it swung the other way, like super hardcore. And And so I had to really live that in order to understand the balance now that I'm more intentionally integrating. And also there was a lot of coming to terms with my own growth and who I have become. Because, when you spend a year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, no relationship, I haven't, I've been on like one date in 4 years. It's a lot of time by yourself. So I had all this time to evolve and heal and grow. And as I evolved and healed and grew, meeting myself in these new phases of my life and becoming aware of who I was becoming, like phase to phase, and ultimately surrendering to the fact that, I made a choice and I don't regret the choice because I know where it's leading me, and that's like ultimate union, and everything that I've ever wanted in a relationship is coming next year. It's been such an interesting journey these past few years because not only has it been deeply healing, but it's been such a mirror to myself, in terms of being a woman, in terms of aging, in terms of my spirituality, in terms of my inner child. I mean, so many facets of my existence and of my multidimensionality has been granted space and opportunity to be seen and to be related with and appreciated. And it's been so dense and so profound because of that these past 4 years. And where I am now, at the end of this phase of being single, I understand that it was really about me learning to fall in love with myself because I'm a recovering codependent. And so this was my time to not only reconnect with my highest self and my highest purpose, but it was a time for me to reclaim my wholeness and to really understand the depth and the scope of how life-changing and life-improving, genuine, productive, and authentic healing is. Because my whole life has changed so dramatically and so beautifully. And all of that time was preparing me for this quantum leap that I've just initiated and for the next phase of my life. And it was almost like an incubation phase a little bit in some ways. And again, I just understand what a blessing it was because, the first 2.5 years were so magical, and it was like, up-leveling spiritually and professionally. And then I was like, okay, I'm ready for relationship universe. And then it was like crickets, again, the whole thing was like, hello, is this on? Is anyone listening to me? Ready for a relationship, and like nothing, silence. It was a process to move through that in an intentional way because it was also reflecting to me how much I had changed. And it wasn't like I wasn't worthy of the relationship that I was calling in. It was because my standards have changed so significantly in the past 4 years. What I want, what I will not settle for, actually, to be specific, in my next relationship is very, very specific. I mean, I have a 10-page partner list for my next partner. And that partner is coming, that union is happening next year. And he is like 95 to 98% of that 10-page list. I'm going to actually discuss more about that in my next episode. But these past 4 years have really prepared me for that and shown me and mirrored back to me not only my highest self, but my evolution and my healing and all these parts of me that needed that time and that space to be seen in an undistracted way, in a reverent way, and to fall in love with myself and to reclaim my wholeness and to understand what true freedom and personal autonomy is such an incredible gift, because I've really transitioned out of those prior codependent behaviors and beliefs and patterns. And of course, that's going to be challenged in my next relationship for sure, but I'm here for it. I'm ready for it. That's the whole point of being in a relationship. That's not the whole point, but that's a big point of it. And so these past 4 years of being in a relationship with myself, with prioritizing a relationship with myself, of course, they've been the most healing years of my entire life, like spiritually and emotionally. They've been a tremendous gift because it's such a homecoming. And everything that I experienced, all the lessons, all the healing, all the growth that I've realized not only serves me right now, but it serves my future self, my future relationship. Everything that I've learned from being single for 4 years in my early 40s has just cemented the fact that it's truly our relationship with ourselves that determines our relationship with everything else. Because as my relationship has evolved in the past 4 years, my external reality has completely evolved. And now my life is magical in a way that I would never have expected 4 years ago. It's so cool. And I'll get into it more in the next episode. And knowing that my union with my next partner is just on deck, like with certainty, with like in my bones. And it just feels really good to have granted myself this time. And even when the universe was like, well, I don't think you're quite ready yet, and I was like, okay, guys, ready for a new relationship now. And it was like crickets, like nothing. And because, then I started searching. I was like, is anybody out there? And it just wasn't happening. And after a while, you're just like, hey, I'm surrendering to this. This is what it is for a reason. Because if it was meant to be another way, it would be another way. And just really relaxing and trusting in the process has been a profound lesson to go. I know that perhaps I feel like maybe I'm consciously ready for another relationship, but there's a grander plan here. It's been a big overarching lesson that I've leaned into in the past 6 months. Like there's a grander plan. The universe really is conspiring with you and for you. And when you learn to just focus on yourself, like in terms of healing yourself and loving yourself and nurturing that relationship with yourself so that you are connected to your higher self, so that you are living in your full vibrancy and in full clarity and in your authenticity, the rest is really, truly just going to fall into place because you're not resisting the flow of your own existence. You're doing your part, which is learning how to be yourself, right? I think that a lot of people are not only disconnected from themselves and thus disconnected from their innate wholeness and lovability and highest selves and also authenticity, but I also think that we forget how to just be, meaning we're constantly doing, we're constantly achieving, we're constantly with another person, and we're not simply like existing enough, just being. And that's been a really big lesson for me in the past 4 years being single and just strictly in a relationship with myself is that just being. I'm present with myself, and to know what that means and to know what that feels like and to know the magnitude of how that actually affects every aspect of my life in a deeply meaningful and profoundly significant way. That's been such a gift and a blessing. And so I hope that me sharing this little bit of my life and my journey is illuminating the fact that we are whole on our own. We don't need anyone to complete us. We can be happy and fulfilled and we can experience magic and we can grow and heal and evolve on our own. That's not to say that we should always be alone, but we're so powerful. And when we reconnect with ourselves and when we prioritize that connection with self and we nurture it and we strive and endeavor to remember and embody our highest truths, which are that we are whole as we are. And our joy is not only bottomless, but it is completely sourced from within. And so is our magic. And that life is really happening for us. And that there is a grander orchestration happening behind the scenes that's serving us We can do a trust fall into the moment. We can do a trust fall into the uncertainty because it's all so fleeting. I spend 4 years now, and I know next year is going to be monumentally different. And I'm really taking a moment now to appreciate these last, months of me being single and having all this time and space to prioritize myself. And what a gift and what a blessing it's been these past 4 years to have so much freedom, so much time and space with myself, to fall in love with myself, because that is going to change how someone else falls in love with me. And so your action step for the week is I want you to set aside 30 minutes to an hour, if you're really committed, this week to be intentionally alone, not as a ploy to avoid being with someone else, but solely just for connecting with yourself. So I want you to remove distractions like your phone, like the television, and just use that half hour or hour to deeply and wholly connect with yourself and approach that time as a gift that you are giving yourself, because it is. Because that's the magic. There's the wisdom. There's the love. There's the joy. It's all within you. And when you are deeply connected to yourself, you have access to all of that. And the more that you understand that, the more that you practice that, really fully being empowered in yourself, the less codependent you become and the more comfortable you become being embodied in your whole authentic self, in your highest purpose, as your highest self. And that's the whole point of healing, is it's you coming home to you. And so it doesn't matter if you're single or if you're in a relationship or if you don't want to be in a relationship, the intention of being present with yourself in a healing way and in a conscious way changes your relationship with yourself. Because when you are fully embodied and connected to yourself, that's when you can know yourself. That's when you can fully love yourself. And that's when you can truly heal yourself. Thank you so much for joining me today in The Simple Source. I hope this episode has inspired you, reminded you of your healing power, and reawakened you to who your true and highest self is. If the show has empowered and enlightened your self-love, growth, and healing journey, please share this episode, leave a positive review on Apple or Spotify, and subscribe to be reminded of new episodes. I am so grateful for your presence, and all of your comments and your support are seen and read and deeply appreciated. They really do help this show so much. Also, sign up for my newsletter, The Weekly Source, to get more healing tips, motivation stories, and to get to know me better. And if you haven't read my book, Unconditional, You Are Perfect As You Are, I invite you to get your copy today and start reading. And lastly, I would love to see you inside my Source membership, the only holistic and comprehensive step-by-step self-healing program that is proven to work. It's time to stop struggling to heal and time to learn how to thrive more simply and joyfully. All the links are in the show notes. Thanks again for joining me today, and I will see you next time.